Good afternoon from the MDB's pavilion at COP28 Dubai. My name is Giampiero Nacci. We have panelists coming as we speak. Please, Martial. I'm a director in the Climate Strategy and Delivery Department at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and I'm really pleased to welcome you all on this panel. The aim to discussing investing in food system with the private sector to address climate change. So the agri-food sector represents 1/3 of global emissions, and is also, has a direct responsibility in the nature crisis, in terms of impact on soil health, in terms of impact on the marine ecosystem, but also in terms of biodiversity loss. At the same time, it's also directly exposed to the effects of climate change. We see increasingly how food value chains, food systems are exposed by disruptions linked to climate events. At the same time, in 2022, only 4% of global finance, climate finance, has flown into the food system. So there is a big discrepancy between the impact the sector has, but also the amount of finance that comes in to address the problem. We're talking today about the role of the private sector in addressing this polycrisis and how private actors can play a role in improving, enhancing the sustainability of the food system and offering solutions to all these crises the world is facing. We're going to particularly focus on the role of the private sector. We often forget that actually the entire food system are built on the private sector. It's not only the large corporations that we have in the room today, but it's also the SMEs, it's also the smallholder farmers, and also actors that sometimes we neglect. For example, the hospitality industry that can play a big role in terms of addressing the issue of food waste at the end of the value chain. So I'm really pleased to have a great panel with us today. I start from my immediate right. Martial Barnou is a senior officer in natural resources, senior natural resources officer at FAO. Joe Puri, associate vice president, strategy and knowledge at IFAD. We have Arnaud van den Berg, CEO of Al-Dakhra. And last but not least, my colleague and dear friend, Natalia Zhukova, head of agribusiness at the EBRD. So let's start with a question for you all. That I like to really get a bit your personal experience with sustainability. So when I talk about sustainability, what comes to your mind? How you interpret this word in your personal life, but also how it influences your work in your organization. Maybe Martial, we start from you.
Okay, thanks for that interesting question. Nice to see fellow panelists, and Joe, and Natalia, and so very nice to be on that panel. For me, if you say sustainability, I have the reflex to think Agenda 2030 and Sustainable Development Goals. So this is my reflex on that with the 3 pillars that you have. So and all of them, so economic, social, and environmental. Myself, I work more on the environmental pillar. So we are here in the Climate Change Convention that really is about the environment of our planet and what we can do. But we see the clear connection. You cannot address the environment alone without, as you mentioned, finance. You need investment, because what we want transformation. And to transform something, you cannot do like that. So you need finance, investment, and people, because if you do not engage with the people, we will fail. So this is basically, in a snapshot, my perhaps too UN response, but I guess this is still one of the best we can have. So.
Thank you, Martha. Very institutional answer. Joe, what about your personal experience?
So for me, sustainability, can you hear me? Yeah. So for me, I think sustainability is the chasm that lies between innovation on one side and scale on the other. And why I'm saying that is, every time we think about sustainability of any investment, you're thinking of different aspects of sustainability. And sustainability is a many splendid thing, right? You can think about operational sustainability, financial sustainability, and the sustainability of impacts. And operation sustainability, do you have the operation unit on the ground to essentially take it through? Do you have the financial sustainability? Is there going to be resources above and beyond the grants that you've given? And then sustainability of impacts becomes essentially ensuring that these are not just one-off. And I think for anything to go from just a twinkle in our eyes, which is like an innovation, and we know many innovations out there, not all of them deserve to go to scale. So what distinguishes an innovation from something that goes to scale has to be sustainability in these different aspects.
Thank you. This is really interesting because you bring different elements to the table here. Arnaud.
Yes, sustainability to me is about being future-proof. I'm not sure if you can hear me, but great. And I'm a true optimist by nature. I believe in human progress, and in the future we've solved so many things already that what the challenges that are ahead, I believe we can solve them if we are sustainable. We're an agricultural company, Aldara. We see our biggest contribution to sustainability in the fact that we will need to feed another 2 billion additional people in the world. That's 25% more mouths to feed between now and 2050. And from agriculture, I believe we can do that by improving our yields with that 25% or more, and do that sustainably. And I believe that's sustainability to me and also the company that I represent.
Looking at the future. Very good. Natalia.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. You asked about personal experiences. To me personally, it's about small intentional choices we all make. I don't know, reducing plastic, opting for public transport. I have a garden, for example, and I don't know, collect rainwater, is put up small bee hotel for solitary bees, you know, add mulch, for example, to apple trees. Speaking about the bank as an organization, it's also about certain choices of people, for example, minimizing or eliminating printing, again, reducing plastic. But in a bigger picture for the bank, I think for us, what we are really trying to promote is acceleration of adoption of sustainability practices by our clients. And I think this is what it means for me.
Thank you very much, Natalia. We've been just joined by Darcy Vetter. You are the Senior Vice President for Public Policy and Government Affairs at PepsiCo. So we just started with a bit of a personal reflection, right? So we'd like to hear from you. When you hear the word sustainability, you know, what comes to your mind, what you feel, what you think about? I'd like to hear about your personal experience and how this impacts your work.
Sure. When I think about sustainability, and especially in food and ag, to me the word like nourishment comes to mind, right? We should be nourishing the earth. We need to be nourishing our bodies and our communities. And when I think about sustainability, it really goes back to my childhood. So I grew up on one of the oldest organic farms in the United States. So my dad converted to organic in 1975. And so as I grew up and helped work on the farm, you know, he talked very deliberately about, you know, the choices he was making and that the soil was our most important crop. And he made very deliberate choices about hiring people in the community and buying our inputs from the community and making sure we were nourishing those around us. And so when I think of sustainability, I think about it in that way. You know, we invited the Nature Conservancy and the Wildlife Department to do counts of birds and species on our farm and saw that as an important part of our farm's health. So I guess for me it's like part of the ethic, right, that I was sort of taught to uphold. But again, that nourishment world of, you know, yourself, your community, and the natural world around you, if you're doing it right, that happens. So.
Thank you very much, Darcy. I'm really pleased about your answer because they give really a tapestry of what sustainability means for us. You know, we went from the very institutional, Martial, reflection on innovations and interdependencies, a reflection on, you know, the future, you know, how sustainability is a way to look at and shape the future, the personal experience of Natalia and how she brings this in her operation, and of course the community dimension, which is of course very, very important. Let's maybe start the conversation, or continue rather the conversation. I'll ask maybe Martial to set a bit the scene. The food, the agricultural agenda is becoming increasingly, rapidly prominent at the COP. You know, it wasn't necessarily a few years ago, now is I would say very central, both in terms of the problem, but also very much in terms of the solution. Can you tell us about, what the COP is about when it comes to food system, food security, sustainability in the food value chain? So give us a bit your perspective and maybe also your reflection about what's happening at COP28 and what you expect coming up in the coming months and future COPs.
Okay, no, I will give you a flavor, and I'm quite sure Joe will also add on that. Agriculture, it's a recent topic in the UNFCCC, in the convention. Despite the fact this is the only sector that is mentioned in the objective of the convention, that is said that we should address the greenhouse gas, and it ends by food production, and it's only production angle, that level, but should not be put at risk. So it is in the DNA of the convention. But then the convention is not, basically the discussion was broad, not specific on any sector. It's only recently that we had a decision specific on agriculture, was the Coroniva joint work on agriculture under the Fijian COP. COP23, now we are COP28, so you see it's only 5 COP. Last COP in Sharm el-Sheikh, they decided to, the first part of Coroniva was setting the scene, understanding on different topics, soil, livestock, nutrient, adaptation, basically where we are. Now they want to move on implementation. So what a COP can do to help implementing the action we need. And to update on where we are, basically, we have unfortunately a conclusion that is just a procedural conclusion, basically the stop the work, no agreement, and the conclusion say, let's see you again in intersession in June, and we will do better. So this is the convention of the negotiation part. It's difficult. It's difficult, but in the same time, when you manage to have something, can give you a very good signal that not only parties, countries, but all stakeholders can use, including MDBs and so on. So I still have hope on that. It's not for now, but let's see. In June, certainly they will advance. But in the same time, you have also the COP presidencies. The COP presidencies, they bring basically the flavor where they want to move. And we had a little bit of agriculture under the Glasgow COP, with the Glasgow breakthrough on a part on agriculture. So it was, I would say, the beginning, the infancy. Then COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh really put agriculture for the moment, launching different initiatives on food and agriculture for sustainable transformation, another one on related, that is on ICANN, so climate action on nutrition, so it's related also, another one on water. So you see, basically, it started really to be taken seriously by a COP presidency. That COP presidency, and you all know there is an Emirate Declaration on food systems. So now the lens is not only on the agriculture or different component, it's really the broad scope of the food system. It's already signed by 100 plus that 150 countries. So it shows really the interest of countries really interested to move on that agenda on food system, recognizing that it's difficult, and the proof is difficult, the negotiation are stuck. So, but basically you see, you have this really movement. I guess it's an unstoppable movement now that we will have to address food system, and together with IFAD, CGIAR, and World Bank, we are really committed to support the negotiation process on the COP presidency. And I will stop here because I want also to hear Joe on that.
Thank you, Marcel. Before we move forward, but what you're a veteran of COP negotiations. What is the role of FAO in all of this?
FAO, like IFAD and others, we are observers. So we are observers, but how to qualify us? Wise observer, and observer important in the process, because basically here we represent the food component of the UN. So we have the three sister organizations, the Rome-based agencies, so FAO, IFAD, and WFP. And basically, this is where we also gather together all the ministers in charge of agriculture, where we have council, big meeting. And so basically, we are very important, helping also countries in their policies. So we are observing, as an observer, the process, but we are trying to bring all what we have since based on our work, and we know quite well where the difficulties are because we are also UN, so basically we are convening a party discussion, and we are trying to bring that bridge between agriculture arena, agenda, with the climate change agenda. So this is our role, and that's why we are also following closely, equipping, I would say, the negotiator with fact, information, knowledge they can use in their discussion. This is why we are really engaged in that process.
Thank you, Marcel. Actually, I like really to have a conversation today, right? So let me go a bit off script. So Joe, maybe if you want to explain a bit the role of IFAD in the negotiation, how you see your role and what your organization represents in this context.
Thanks, Gian Piero. So, I'm going to add to what Marcel said, but also take a little bit of a different tack. When I first came to IFAD, which was in 2020, one of the first discussions that we had at my board, at the IFAD board, on climate. So I was presenting a paper, a strategic discussion paper on climate. And I remember a few member states coming forward saying, why are we discussing climate? You're an agricultural agency. Isn't this mission drift? And now, fast forward to 2023, right? I think what we are witnessing is really a ground shift. And to be fair, not just from the COP, but also from the food and agricultural agencies, right? Recognizing that food and agriculture doesn't happen unless you think about climate. And for the climate people to realize that if you really, and these are the numbers, 1/3 of the overall emissions in the world are from food systems, but we know that at least I know for the smallholders that we focus on, they're responsible for 1/3 of the overall food as well. So if you want to think about food security, you've got to think about those people who are contributing. And in developing countries, more than 70% of the food comes from smallholders, so you've got to focus on them. So that's both the challenge and the opportunity, and the two have to come together. So I think this idea that, you're going to partition it and not think of it in a blended way is long gone. And so what we are seeing with Coronivia, but then also Sharm el-Sheikh, the support program that we are all signatories to, FAO is, IFAD is, but also the Emirates Declaration, which is really bringing together this idea that food and water really have to play a very important role, both in the work that we are doing when we are thinking about mitigation, but is a key frontier when we've got to think about resilience and adaptation, is really important recognition of the intertwining of these sectors. And the fact that we have to take on a systems approach. So I'm going to say one more thing, which is with the World Bank, for example, we started to develop what's called the financing for food systems, and separately also with FAO, we've been talking about the means of implementation, right, from the Food Systems Summit. And the idea is really first to define what is a food system? And I can do sort of like a quick poll of the audience here and ask you, well, can you give me a definition of what is a food system? Anyone? Anyone who will tell me what's not a food system? So the challenge, and it really, if you think about it for a second, the challenge here is that everything falls into a food system, but really creating a boundary around it is really important. So when we started to think about what are the needs of individual countries, and this is where IFAD comes in and plays an important role in really designing those investments on the ground so that they can speak to food system transformations on one side, but also ensure that they're speaking to the NDCs and they're speaking to the NAPs, and all of them are intertwined together. But when you want to decide and define, therefore, and put boundary conditions around a food system, you've got to say, this is what comes in and this is what is left out. And so when we were looking at finance flows coming into food systems, we had to define that. And so with the OECD and with the World Bank, we defined it as many sectors within, and I can give you definitions, that are within food production, within nutrition, within infrastructure, social protection, and climate. So all of that, so subsectors or definitions, so sub-elements of each one of these sectors that are traditionally seen as stovepipes or separate are now coming together in the overall definition of what constitutes a food system. This is what has helped us to also decide and understand what are the financial flows that are coming in, what are the needs of individual countries, and how can food system transformation pathways, NDCs, and NABs talk to each other without being sort of the siloed approaches that we tend to do traditionally.
Thank you very much. Very interesting, and I like the evolution of the conversation and the role of IFAD in this context. Moving from two observers to another one, EBRD is also an observer. So Natalia, I'd like to hear from you how DBRD has really progressed in mainstreaming climate consideration in our activities, how you see this particularly in your area of work.
I'll start with numbers. For the last 10 years, we probably have invested 2.3 billion euro in 200 projects which are called green, one way or another. And only this year, we already have 450 million euro investments which are considered green, which means it's pretty much 20% in 1 year. So you could see clear acceleration. We are doing a lot to streamline the process and to push clients to promote to them adoption of sustainability practices. Al-Dahra and Arnaud is here knows very well that we are asking them a lot of questions on that front. So what we have moved to, we are completely moving away from the use of proceeds concept. We are really moving, regardless of whether we provide CapEx financing, working capital, we are really moving into promotion of best sustainable practices, adoption of corporate climate governance schemes, clear development of clear low carbon pathways, regardless whether it's at the borrower level, now very often at the group level, to make sure that the group has it and then trickle down to all subsidiaries. I'm obviously talking about larger clients. But we also increasingly looking at smallholder farmers, and I relate very much to what Joe said in terms of coordinating efforts. We do it in various ways. We start when we work with large aggregators like Al-Dahra, for example, or any other big client. We try to promote that they work and make their supply chain greener. We also launched supply chain financing jointly with our SME F&D team. And we have done a few deals in this area. What it brings shorter payment terms to suppliers of a large aggregator, but it also done on condition that these suppliers implement or meet certain ESG-linked standards. So it's, again, another way of acceleration. We have done a number of sustainability-linked loans this year. And in a broader sense, it's probably not the market type of sustainability-linked loan, but still, we put certain KPIs, and for that we use increasingly blended finance, which is also helping us a lot. When we say set KPIs for scope 1, 2, 3, and then depending on the client, water reduction, waste reduction, recycling, I mean anything, adoption of regen practices, reduction per unit of production of whatever parameters depending on the subsector, because food systems, and we finance the whole value chain from primary up until food retail and everything in between, including farming, logistics, packaging, production of food, beverages, anything related to food. So it is very important.
Thank you, Natalia. Can sort of confirm, the complexity managing these new approaches and how also the entire institution is now moving in that direction. So we talk about the institutional perspective, the IFI perspective. Let's go to the private sector. So maybe Darcy, let's start from you. At the beginning, before you joined, we talked about the multiple crises that the world, but particularly the food sector is facing. Talk about the biodiversity crisis, nature crisis, climate change, of course, but also other disruptions linked, for example, to trade issues, of course, the geopolitical situations, a pandemic only a couple of years ago. So I'm really curious to know how a private enterprise like PepsiCo is bringing this element in its strategic planning, how you deal with complexity, how you manage to integrate this consideration in your risk assessment, in your strategic planning.
Well, you're absolutely right that the complexity continues to increase, right? We saw it with the pandemic, we've seen it with geopolitical tension, and certainly climate now has us in a situation where 100-year disaster is happening every other year in terms of droughts or storms, and the unpredictability of that situation makes us think differently, right? And I think the word has been mentioned a couple of times that really that underlying quality that we value is resilience, and how do we build it in to our systems. And climate itself, trade shocks, these other things you talked about challenge a business like PepsiCo end to end. And so we have to sort of look end to end at what we can control, both to adapt and to mitigate on climate and on other risks as well. And I think for many companies, not just PepsiCo, what happens in our four walls is a little bit easier to do that, right? So if you think about scope 1 and 2 emissions, we've made a lot of the changes that we need to make, or we're on the path to making them. It is clear that we need to, move to renewable energy and operating our factories. We need to electrify our fleet and bring down emissions related to transport. And so, as we think about our operations, certainly insulating ourselves from shocks, looking at reducing cost and increasing resilience is more straightforward. When you start thinking about scope 3 and all the places where we are dependent on others in our value chain who also face greater volatility, not least of which, of course, are farmers, thinking about how to build resilience starts with partnership. And so we really have to be able to put ourselves in the shoes of those farmers and say, what are the tools that we can use as PepsiCo, who are the partners, whether that's banks or through policy with some of the organizations on stage here with me, that can help to de-risk some of the decisions that farmers need to make them more resilient in the face of climate change. And then what can we do as a customer to encourage those activities? Can we help with financial support, with technical support, with cultural support, with something like a demonstration farm to show how new technologies lead to better outcomes in the field, with creative financing to help with the initial transition before those regenerative agricultural practices start to pay back. Can we use our agronomists? Can we partner with the knowledge of FAO, with ministries of agriculture, to make sure that farmers are receiving the training and the assistance that they need? And so, it quickly becomes clear, right, that we don't control that destiny. We have to think about the ways that we can kind of bring those outcomes to bear. And so we do that both internally and with our external partners, in some ways through innovation, right? You want to take a technological approach as well as that community approach, through joint investments with some of the organizations here, but also jointly with partners. We work pre-competitively. In many cases, our competitors, others in the food and beverage sector, are facing the same thing. So we're thinking about how we can just adjust together. And then we have to remember that we know a lot of things that maybe other people don't. We can use our power of logistics to help farmers gain access to things that aren't needed for our supply chain, but where we can assist. We have agricultural research that we do. Can we share it more broadly? So I think we can think about ways that we can use our knowledge, our scale, what we see across different regions, for example, to compare, contrast, and share that knowledge to make that transition happen a little faster.
Thank you very much, Darcy. I like to raise the same question more or less to Anu, really about how you incorporate these risks in your business planning, your investment decisions, your operational decisions. I'm particularly interested how you say you're an optimist, you look forward, how you move from being reactive to be proactive, to be preventive.
Let me be very proactive on this stage and then invite PepsiCo to have a conversation with us. As farmers, we can provide you, for instance, potatoes grown through our reg ag practices in Egypt, which we used to do in the past, actually. But that partnership fell apart because we couldn't find a long-term partnership, and I think that's where we can find each other. As farmers, we farm around the world in about 20 different countries. But farming is never a one-year thing. It's never a 3-year thing. Farming you do for 10, 20 or more years because your investments take time. Investments in your soil, that's your best investments. That's your best friend, right? Really pay off in the long term. So if we work together with customers in the value chain, we are really looking forward to a longer-term partnership. Because if we do these regenerative agricultural practices, they are beneficial to us. They are beneficial to our bottom line, but they require investments where financing partners can help, but also off-takers can really help to secure us. We will buy your product at a reasonable pricing formula for the next 5 or 10 years. So you can do your investors in the planters that you need. Because if you do no-tillage farming, you need different planters than your regular planters. You need different harvesters. And those investments where you typically replace your machinery only once every 10 or 15 years, now you have to replace your entire fleet to do and meet the requirements of your customer. Happy to do that if you want to go into a partnership for multi-years. And then actually large-scale farmers like us can help you. But if we have difficulties, like with a large-scale farming platform to do these investments, just imagine what the smallholders are facing to do the same, to find you in the market and to make the consideration, do I buy this expensive machinery to be more sustainable in my farming? So I think these risks we can tackle by stronger, longer-term partnerships. That would help us a lot.
Thank you very much. Can I ask briefly another personal question? So, why you are at the COP? What is your main objective, your main reason for being here?
Well, I was actually challenged by some of my friends on a recent trip I had, and I started talking about all the great things that I believe we're doing, and said, well, if you do so many great things, why don't I know about it? Right? It can't be true. Why do I believe that what you're doing is really sustainable? So, well, actually, we have no time to talk about it. We're farming. And we as a company need to shift the paradigm a bit and start talking about a lot of the good things that we're doing. For instance, we're starting to, we have our largest farm is in Romania, 56,000 hectares of farmland. And we're doing that with regenerative practices, which could bring us carbon credits. But we never bothered to go through all that administrative process that is required to do so, to get actually paid for that. We're going through that with a partnership with Agrina. We signed an MOU earlier today with them to get registered for all the good things that we're doing. But so far, nobody knew about it. Even we didn't get rewarded for it, while what we were doing actually makes a lot of sense. So why we're at COP28? To show that it can be done. There is sustainable farming. Regenerative agriculture exists in practice. It's not just a catchphrase that people love to talk about. And as a company, we like to talk about it because we do want to attract capital and investors. We do want to talk to customers that would love to find indeed the low carbon inputs into their process. I'm sure PepsiCo is looking for that. I saw yesterday online the CEO of Heineken asking for low carbon malting barley. We can provide that to you. I'm not sure if you're online listening to us, but we can do that. So sometimes in the value chain it's not so easy to find each other because maybe also as a farmer we don't talk enough about what we're doing.
Thank you very much. Before moving to Puri, can I ask the same question to you? Why PepsiCo is at the COP?
Well, for many reasons, right? I mean, but I think in some ways similar to what we're just expressed is we have people up and down our value chain. We have our government partners. We have civil society in one place focused on a similar problem. And just at the panel just before this one, before I came running in, so sort of the same question, and that we realized that sitting up on the dais were people that lived within a pretty close radius from one another, but who hadn't met and didn't know that we were all sort of working on this issue. And so, having the world focused on climate and what we do through that lens, I think does create the opportunity for partnership. There are those who say, it will just be a talk shop, and I think the test of whether we got what we needed out of COP, right, is the number of conversations where we follow up, and we look at how to partner with those who are bringing other skills to the table. But that, personally for me, was to be listening to the conversations around food and ag specifically, to say, wait a second, who's bringing some new data, who's bringing, new technology, new perspectives that we need to be, looking at, thinking about, and partnering with.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased about your answer because, there are a lot of criticism about, sometimes about, COP, what it means and the impact, etc. But really, being a platform for communication, a magnifier of your activities, I think there is a lot of value into that. I'd like to go back to risk and involve Puri in this discussion. So clearly we have big organizations that have the tools, the capacity to understand risk, to manage risk, to incorporate this analysis in their decision-making process, in their operation. What about the small farm holders? What are the challenges for them? And what IFAD is doing to support them in this context?
Thank you. Thanks, Gian Piero. So smallholder farmers actually face slightly different, they face a different kind of risk, but I like how Arno put it as well. The big challenge, and I'm an economist by training, so I've been trained to think about markets, right? We all think about markets, but the big challenge for smallholder farmers is there are missing markets. So we all assume in classical economics theory that, you need capital, you essentially go to the bank and you should be able to get it so long as you can provide some collateral. A lot of smallholder farmers, and identically for labor markets, that you should have access to labor so long as you're willing to pay the price. But actually, that doesn't happen in most markets where smallholders are operating. You can, even if you're willing to pay the price, and this is very similar, now we are finding this also with large insurance companies, by the way. Insurance companies will definitely not go and insure certain contexts because no amount of premium is good enough for them to operate. So suddenly we are confronted with this world which neoclassical economics did not deal with or think about, which is we've got missing markets across the board. We've got essentially risks that are magnifying this, and we've got the challenge then to think about also at the same time black swan events or the unknown unknowns. So things that I don't even know I don't know. And that becomes really important if we are thinking about future fit companies and we want to come in as an agency that is truly looking after the smallholder farmers. Darcy spoke about conflicts. Large amounts of the world today are getting affected because of climate uncertainty, which we know, evidence shows us, will lead to increased interpersonal and intercommunal conflict. So in this context then, smallholder farmers have missing markets, they have increased likelihood of being exposed to conflict, and we then also have to deal with absent finance. Where IFAD comes in is therefore in all three of these areas and helps to provide and create new markets, provide through platforms, and I can give you an example, which is the Africa Risk Climate Adaptation Financing Mechanism that we just announced at this COP, which is a $200 million platform where we are bringing in bilateral donors, multilateral donors, and the private sector with IFAD blending these finances, and then working in 4 countries in Africa, Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, and Rwanda, to then ensure that not only are we catalyzing markets that are existing, but are creating new markets with green credit lines, and that are truly targeting the populations that are truly vulnerable as a consequence of the climate crisis. So the smallholder farmers, the people that are insecure and are likely to fall under the poverty line, because very few institutions target those people. But bringing in that blended finance then also ensures that we have one other responsibility, which is benefit sharing. Not very many institutions ensure that the farmers or rural producers who are most likely to invest in these regenerative practices, agroforestry, agroecology, no-till, conservation agriculture, are the ones that are also benefiting as a consequence of these investments. Benefit sharing is then the other mainstay of the investments that we design, so that we can ensure that those benefits and those proceeds also go back to the farmers through the off-taker mechanisms, through farmers' organizations that we work with, and through the indigenous peoples' organizations that we work with.
Thank you very much, Joe. And actually, this point on benefit sharing links very well with my next question. I'd like to start with Darcy. I guess we all agree that in a disrupted world, because of climate change, because of biodiversity losses, etc., ultimately value is destroyed. And you may argue that even a commercial return may disappear altogether. So as a commercial entity, that ultimately you are driven, by commercial objectives, how can you combine, your commercial objective, your driver as a corporate, and the responsibility you have towards your shareholders, with ultimately the broader climate objectives, the public goods that are associated to interventions that address climate change?
Well, in many ways, it's not an option for us to combine, right? We are seeing regulation from the CSRD, from the Securities and Exchange Commission, right? Our investors want to know about that risk that we face from climate and from, environmental pressures and sustainability, and they want to understand how we're factoring it into our value chain. We're a food and beverage company, which means reliable supply of food is absolutely necessary for our bottom line. And, as I noted before, that reliability is being significantly challenged. And so the definition of value for us, I think, has changed. And so we want reliable partners. We want to know that our farmers are making investments that will mean they can consistently supply us with high quality, potatoes or corn or wheat or other inputs, and have made the investments in many ways through partnership, right, to be able to do so. It's a wise investment in our own resilience to do that. Some of Joe's comments earlier, and this maybe is a slightly indirect reference to your question, but I think we do, as business, also have a responsibility to create value and create choice among the supply chain. And before I joined PepsiCo, I spent a number of years as an agricultural trade negotiator. And my job was to open markets for U.S. agricultural products. And if I did my job right, then a U.S. farmer would have more options to sell her products across the world to more countries, in more forms, under more circumstances, and so more opportunities to create value and to use the resources they have on their farm to, figure out what combination would be most valuable for them. In many ways, the regenerative agriculture tasks business with a similar choice, right? Which is, how can we think about encouraging practices that will create more resiliency and more consistency of supply, but do it in a way that also drives farmer options. And again, that may require working with and partnering with folks at this, on this stage, with our competitors, with other partners, to say, are we measuring value and success and the outcomes of those regenerative practices in the same way? Are we recognizing each other's programs that we've set up so that we don't make farmers choose between, if they do these practices, they could sell to us but not somebody else? So, again, thinking about the scale that a company like PepsiCo has, thinking about the frameworks that FAO and others set up to help look at what are the benefits of certain practices and making sure those are interoperable and implemented in a way that drives farmer options and choice, not just looks specifically at my supply chain, but at all the crops that farmers might grow and how they can maximize value of those things.
Super, thank you very much. You mentioned two words that are actually quite interesting and link well with Arnaud. You talk about choices, you talk about responsibility. So what are the choices that a business operation like yours can make? What it means, responsibility in the context, again, responsibility versus your shareholder investors, but also vis-a-vis the value that you want to create as an organization. How you can combine the business objectives with the broader responsibility that we have as individuals, but also as organizations.
Now, farming is about every day making choices what you do with your land. And fortunately, a lot of the choices that we make, sustainability choices, are also good for the bottom line. We would love to get further support to do so because you can do them faster. A few examples. In Romania, where the majority of our land is fully irrigated, the yields on those lands could be 3 times higher than the pieces of land that are not irrigated yet, that are rain-fed. And the practices that we have by precise agriculture and making sure we don't apply more than the soils need mean that we can do it at a lower cost. But if you imagine the neighboring farm that may not have irrigation and may not have those best practices, getting yields that are 3 times or more less than what we get on the best practice farming. So what we want to do is bring our best practices to more land. That's why we want to double our land bank so we can do more with less. We want to bring those best practices from one country to another where we operate. And those choices, we believe, are our best contribution to sustainability, because we will need less farmland to feed more people. And if we indeed will have 25% more people in 25 years from now, let's hope we can do it not with 25% more farmland, because that would impact nature resources or other things we want to do with the land that we would claim for agriculture. So I believe on the day-to-day choices that we make in investments, in farming practices, but also financial investments, because all these things that we love to do will cost money. So going from flood irrigation, which is highly inefficient water usage, to irrigation or pivot irrigation with dragon lines, or drip irrigation or soil drip irrigation, can save you 97% of water usage. And in areas like in Arizona, California, where we farm, that makes a lot of sense. There's not a lot of water, the land is expensive, so saving that makes a lot of sense. But it requires a lot of investments to do so. So there's a lot of choices to make along the way to be as sustainable as you can. There is a big payoff from that. But those investment choices we need to make every day would be helped by partnerships with financial partners, with governments that are supporting us with these practices, and with off-takers, so we can make those day-to-day choices now with a payoff in the future.
Thank you so much. Can I stay on this topic of choices, maybe bringing back Joe into this discussion? We look at small, oldest farmers as rule takers, standard taker. We think that perhaps they don't have choices. But what do you think actually smallholder farmers can bring to the table in terms of best practice, in terms of experience? Do they have something to share even with large organizations that are setting examples of best practice?
Okay, thank you. So smallholder farmers, actually, we did an evidence review last year. And I was one of the co-authors with my colleagues, and we wanted to understand, where is it that we know that smallholder farmers are doing quite well, and where we don't have evidence. So which doesn't mean the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. So that's really important, right? So where did we find that there was evidence that, yes, smallholder farmers is a superior farming method? One, we know that smallholder farmers tend to be far more diverse and adopt agrobiodiverse and agroforestry and agroecological practices compared to large monocultural farms. The evidence is very good out there, and they do it primarily because there is an incentive for them to invest in soil health, and they don't have the kind of monetary power that they can, you need to have to go and get fertilizers, etc. And so they tend to be far more biodiverse on their plots of land. The second piece of evidence that we found was that smallholder farmers are also likely to be far more efficient with respect to land. So not with respect to labor, right? There is a marginal product of labor and there's a marginal product of land. With respect to land, they are far more efficient compared to most other farming types. And this is also primarily given to us by the evidence. We brought this out in the previous rural development report. They occupy 11% of the overall land area, but they produce, depending on which continent, at least amongst developing countries, 70% of the food. So they tend to be far more efficient. We also know, but where smallholder farmers we know, we don't know the evidence very well on, is in terms of global supply chains and vulnerability. So the challenge for us is, so on one side, when supply chains are local and localized, we know that smallholder farmers, when they are tapping into local markets, tend to be far more resilient than those that are subjected to global supply chains. Which is not to say that we should only be local. The pendulum has swung too far for us to not recognize the comparative advantage of what global trade also ensures, but really to recognize that if we are wanting to ensure increased resilience, smallholder farmers can be far more resilient than those that are tapping into larger supply chains. And then the fourth point is that when we look at our own evidence, so we've looked at our $7.5 billion portfolio just that ended in 2021, and we found that smallholder farmers are also able to make their communities far more resilient, are able to access markets, local markets with far greater efficiency when they're provided with infrastructure, and are able, the marginal return from investment in infrastructure is far greater. So it's really important that to recognize that there are investment opportunities to be had with smallholder farmers. But I do want to say that where I think the jury's still out and where we still want to see as to what kind of evidence exists is in the context of carbon markets, in the context of aggregation economies. Most markets, most investors, especially large investors, want to come in when there are aggregation economies and economies of scale. And there we do require organizations, PepsiCo, yourself, to then help create essentially those platforms where large off-takers can come and play and provide the options for aggregation for economies of scale.
Thank you very much, Joe. Marcel, can I bring you back in the discussion? Yes. So we've heard the story of large corporates. We heard the experience of smallholder farmers. So can we go back to the title of this event? So how do you see the role of the private sector? Are you convinced that we are on the right trajectory, or there are something that is really missing?
How to start? Perhaps just a reflection why we are all here today. Farmers, private sector, UN agencies, because we have to recognize that transformation of agriculture, of that sector, is not an option. This is clear. This is what IPCC is saying. If we are not using all the sectors, including agriculture, we will fail to go to 1.5 degree target, zero hunger target, Agenda 2030. So I guess we have no option just to be talking to each other to find the solution. So a lot of you, and you were mentioning that for farmers it's a choice. It's also a choice for MDBs, because you don't want to have investment that are basically not going the right direction. It's also a choice for private sector. They have to decide on where to invest and to be sure that their model is sustainable economically sustainable. But basically, this is why we are all here today. So on that, I'm optimist because it's finally a good movement that we really need to break the silo. At the same time, we know it's not simple. It's not simple to put around the table UN agencies, farmers, private sectors. So we need to find the mechanism to do that. We have different ways. We have different forums already existing. We have the Committee of Food Security, for instance, where we have parties, countries. We have also the private sector mechanism that is there, that is also bring his voice. We have observers, we have farmers. But I guess we need more of those space to ensure that all together we find the right solutions. There is not only one solution, there's plenty of solutions. Solutions as country-specific, farm-specific also. It's not the same for your farm, the farm of your neighbor even, or the farm in another country. But we know basically we have, the vision is there. We know where is the vision. What we want is to have a, and back to your first question of sustainability, on my personal answer, what I want is for my daughter and my son to have a life in a planet that will be sustainable. So this is what I want. So I guess we are all sharing that vision. So know how to unite and to act together. Basically, we have to recognize all what we are doing, to put all this in the equation and try to find agreement on where we can move together. For that, we need tools. Tools to take decisions to minimize all different risks. It can be a reputational risk for an agency. It can be an economic risk for private sector. It can be a risk for basically all your business, your farm. So we are all coping with the risk. For this, we need tools. So prospective tools to understand ex ante to take the good decision. So tools to put, having an idea, if I do an action, or if I implement a policy, or we have invest in a project, I'm going the right direction. So we need to invest in that. Tools to minimize the risk. So tool to assess risk, tool to assess greenhouse gas impact, tool to assess biodiversity impact. And we need to look at the synergies and trade-off. There are some trade-offs. It's not all synergies. We need to minimize the trade-off. So for instance, I can provide the name of a tool. One is together with IFAD, ABC map. So we are trying to look at the same time adaptation, biodiversity, and carbon, so greenhouse gas, all together, and then after it's to the people to decide. But basically, you have the most complete picture. It's not enough. We have to add on that the risk. You have to add on that the social aspect also, because it will have an impact on people. So we need to have tools and to find the best way. We need places to discuss. I was late because we were having the inception meeting of the FAST partnership, IFAD is part, where it's basically a partnership that we want to exchange on 3 pillars. Finance, and this is quality and quantity. So it's not only the quantity of finance, also the quality of finance. Finance that will reach the right people. So this is exactly what we want. Policy, because even if you want to have a sector that is really attractive, you need also to have policies that help, that turn this possible. If you are a country and you reach out the Green Climate Fund saying, I want 100 million or several, or you, EBRD, and saying, I want to invest 100 million in that subsector, you will analyze the policy of the country. And if you realize that there is nothing as a backup, you will say, my risk is perhaps too high. So we need to work all together on the finance, the policy sector, and the third pillar that we should not forget, it's data. Information, knowledge, capacity building. Because also we cannot do or develop the right policy if we don't have the data we need. So we need to also to track and to be sure that then when we take action, when we decide based on a multi-criteria analysis, that we are also able to track our progress. So this is a 3 pillar that we have to address. Climate, policy, data, knowledge, capacity building, and based on not only one actor, all the actors together to find the best, let's say, tools we can develop together for the best action we can implement.
Thank you, Marcel. I'd like to close with Natalia. You heard a lot of interesting inputs. Your portfolio is virtually 100%, private sector focused. So what you're doing to, let's say, reflect these considerations and these needs from the private sector in the products that EBRD can offer, and also how you think you need to do to remain, for EBRD to remain relevant in supporting this transition?
I'll start with the last thing that Marcel said. We all know that food systems are very complex. To reflect this complexity, we really need a lot of trade-offs on the way. And I like the phrase to minimize the trade-offs, because in the end, sustainability involves economic, environmental, and social sustainability. If you imagine a triangle, you cannot make it like this, right? So it has to be balanced. And I think our role as a international financial institution is to balance competing needs, taking into account desire of private clients, government, countries, but always taking into account local context. Because whatever we are talking about in developed countries, for example, a lot of things that Darcy was saying, and a lot of things that Joe was saying about developing countries are very much relevant, but very much different. They're not the same. So you will always, whatever is super innovation in tiny Tajikistan will never be an innovation in Poland or US. So you have to also balance these approaches, right? And I think that our role as an international financial institution is crucial in bringing everyone together, because we work with small farmers. We do deals like 500,000 easily, not a problem. We do deals like 150 million, working with aggregators who then work with their supply chain, and we are also providing advisory and technical assistance to this thing. We work with FAO a lot. We cooperate, I don't even remember, for 28 years, doing a lot at supply chain level, at policy level, at country level, at climate change level. You may remember, Jean-Pierre, we launched at COP26 in Glasgow a joint report on decarbonization of the agri-food sector. And we called it, is it utopia or the new green wave? And there were certain actions identified. I also wanted to reflect a bit on what Arnaud said about future look. This year we launched a competition for startups, jointly with our SME team, who also has Star Venture program. We received 100 applications from our countries of operations, funnily enough, a lot from North Africa, for example. We didn't expect that, way less from Central Eastern Europe. We selected the winners, and earlier this week there was Agritech Innovation Summit where we presented our winners. We promoted them, some of them already managed to raise money. And we are only talking about very concentrated geography. We are not like IFC global coverage, right? We have more concentrated geography, but still we are doing quite a lot. And then talking a bit more on government relationship, I know that your team, Jean-Pierre, is working a lot with governments on certain pilots or sets of pilots for them to deliver on nationally determined contributions. So we are covering client level, government level, and anything in between, because we are also working again with FAO a lot, with various industry associations, with universities to bring the voice of the private sector, for example, in development of particular curricula that is needed, say for potato growth and modern farming practices, precision agriculture. I'll stop here. I think I talked enough.
Thank you very much, Natalia. We're kind of almost there. We have only a few minutes. So allow me to ask you a very quick question to close this panel. And thank you, because you provided really very insightful comments and observations. The question is, what you learned so far at the COP that you will bring home and you will reflect upon and use in your own activity and perhaps even in your personal life?
So I think for me, COP and fora like this just help me connect the dots a bit more, right? We see what FAO is learning on the roadmap, for example. What are policy strategies to help keep agricultural production in 1.5 without sacrificing productivity? How do I use that, right? How do I fit into those policy frameworks? So for me, it's really, I think, connecting the dots and then personally taking what I learned and asking myself then, where is PepsiCo uniquely suited to bring interesting skills to the table, and reminding myself, what are ways we can drive value and choice for others in our supply chain.
Thank you. Martial?
I wanted to say exactly the same, so I was starting. Now, connectivity, for sure, we need to connect, and we are here basically to connect each other. So, but to add on that, and perhaps it's also the feeling of that COP, nothing is simple. Complexity, and we have to address the complexity. But it's not because it's complex, because sometimes we fail, like the agriculture negotiator, or basically we postpone, that we should abandon. We need really to keep eye or willingness to move, because I will repeat myself, we have no choice. So basically, we need to address that complexity, and only all together we can do that. So.
Thank you. Joe?
Thanks, Gianpiero. So I would say, on one side, the recognition that there's a whole lot more innovation that we can bring to bear on a problem that is as wicked as the one that we are facing today, which is the nexus of climate, food, water, and agriculture. But on the other side, I think what is required for this to truly be transformational in the way that Marshall talked about it, we require a whole lot of other things to come together, and that's essentially the nexus of the blend of financing sources, the building of bankable projects, and a commitment to benefit sharing.
Super. Arnaud?
No, what I take away is that there's a lot of people are busy working hard in their own field on sustainable practices, agricultural practices, banking practices, and that we need to find each other, because a lot is being done. And if we do it together, we probably be faster achieving our goals.
Fantastic. Natalia?
I think we need to talk more in this type of things. That's a lesson learned, to feel the pulse, because everyone can share a lot. And even short calls would be very beneficial just to touch base, not necessarily at COP. To me, I wanted to go back also a bit to digital and data sharing and everything, and also smallholder farmers, because at this Agri-Tech Innovation Summit, we met companies, amazing solutions, who reached out, I don't know, in finance input providing to 100,000 farmers, insurance startups, these are startups at seed basis, pretty much, not even Series A, who already provided insurance to 6 million farmers. So there is plenty there, how to link and bring everyone together. We need to think and plan and do more in that respect, I think.
Thank you, Natalia, Arnaud, Joe, Martial, and Darcy. I learned a lot from this conversation, in fact, so thank you so much for sharing your experience, your vision, and your aspirations with us today. Thank you very much from the audience here in the room, but also, of course, connected offline. Thank you very much.